You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome into the crossover for the Florida State at Notre Dame game. I am Brian Smith of Locked On Seminoles. There's Tyler Wojciak from Locked On Irish. Thank you, Tyler, for coming on the show. Appreciate it. Well, this doesn't appear to be a likely close game. I think the last time I saw a point spread, upper 20s. Just opening thoughts about the Irish. Obviously, every game, every point matters for them as they try to get into a situation where they improve their stock each and every week in the playoff committee's eyes. So what do you think about this game? First thoughts.
Well, all season long, despite the struggles that Florida State has had, I always had it in the back of my mind, like it's still Florida State. Like they still have good players over there. This is a team that just went undefeated in the regular season. And it's like, even though they're struggling, I still felt like this was going to be a tough matchup for Notre Dame. And then the more research that I did about Florida State, and I was looking back through some of their games, and I consider the games that I've actually watched, and I'm with you. I don't think that this is going to be a close game. And it's still so shocking to see, like when I was watching Florida State against North Carolina, it reminded me of watching the Louisville Cardinals play college basketball last season, because I had grown up and Louisville basketball was one of the best programs in college basketball every single year. And then I watched them play under Kenny Payne, and it's like impossible for my mind to register how a team wearing that same uniform that I had grown up watching play, you know, some of the best basketball there was to be played. And then now Florida State is basically doing the same. It's just hard for me to wrap my head around it. But yeah, as Notre Dame prepares to play them on Saturday, I don't really see one matchup where Florida State could take advantage.
This is how bad it is, Tyler. Earlier this week, and I do this on one day, then I flip it the next, offense against defense, each direction. Florida State's offense is truly offensive. I have 11 categories that I have written down looking at, and there are 134 teams in the FBS. They are below the 120 mark in 7 of the 11 categories I have on my sheet right here. I mean, that's hard to do. To be that inept, to be that unbelievably pathetic is insane. Like they're 133rd in rushing. They are 132nd in total offense, 133rd in scoring, 130th in plays of 20 or more yards rushing. They've only got 4 of them all year. I mean, these like chunk yardage plays are huge. Florida State's got 4. It's just unbelievable. The tackles for loss allowed, they're 124th. And as I was telling you before we came on the air, Florida State has 2 young quarterbacks, because for anybody that didn't already know, DJ Uiagalelei is out. He's got some kind of a hand problem, broken thumb, whatever it is. I don't know if he's going to play again or not, but he's not expected to play, to my knowledge, anytime soon. So they got Luke Kromenhoek, a true freshman, battling with redshirt freshman Brock Glenn. Neither is remotely ready for a cover 2 defense. And here comes Notre Dame with, in my opinion, the most complex defense in college football at the major level, and they got a lot of speed. In layman's terms, I mean, you cover Notre Dame and watch them every day. Can you give the average fan for Florida State an overview of what you expect to see based on the season so far for Notre Dame's defense?
It's been incredible what Al Golden has done since he took over as the defensive coordinator. I remember when Marcus Freeman hired him, it was his first defensive coordinator hire once he became the head coach at Notre Dame. And it was an interesting move because Al Golden was the linebackers coach for the Cincinnati Bengals, and they were actually on their way to play in the Super Bowl. And it was weird because Notre Dame couldn't announce the defensive coordinator, even though everyone knew it was probably going to be Al Golden, until mid-February, because the Bengals were playing so late into the season. You're thinking, okay, it makes sense with Al Golden's head coaching experience. Marcus Freeman needs someone in the room who's been around, who's sort of been there and done that. But what I did not expect was for his defense to be as complex and as complicated as it is. But in order to do that, you have to have veteran guys. You have to have really smart football players. So one thing you could expect from this defense is they are going to run a lot of man coverage, despite the fact that they have a sophomore and a true freshman now starting at cornerback. They had Benjamin Morrison, who is one of the best cornerbacks in college football, go down. I believe it was after the Stanford game, had to have hip surgery. So he is out for the rest of the season. And then they just reloaded with the freshman number 15, Leonard Moore, who was a 4-star recruit and they're going to run press man a lot. And then at the back end of that defense, you have Xavier Watts, who's one of the best safeties in college football, and then Adon Schuler, who's a redshirt freshman who's basically been somewhat of a revelation because they picked up someone, Rod Hurd, in the transfer portal who played for Northwestern, played a bunch of football for the Wildcats, but then he just got beat out by a redshirt freshman who has been really talented. So expect some even more troubles trying to pass the ball if you're Florida State. And then on the front seven, you've got a bunch of young linebackers, and then Jack Kaiser, who's like the veteran, who they're really fast and they are violent. When they hit guys, the other team feels it. I can't even count how many times where Drake Bowen or Kingston Viliamu-Asa, two of those linebackers there in the middle, have tackled an opposing player and then they had to walk off the field because they were hurt. They're not dirty players. They're just violent. So they are going to stress the opposing offense all night long. And really, you just have to hope that you break off some big plays to put up some points on them.
You just mentioned something that I completely agree with. Florida State, they're not going to nickel and dime their way down the field against a mid-level ACC team. 4 and 6 yard plays sound great in theory, but they need 27-yard runs, 40-yard runs, those kinds of plays. Now, Notre Dame, in my opinion, is not going to really change what they do against Florida State. Florida State's got athletes. That's not in question, but they don't have much congruency. They don't have any consistency. The offensive line is a sieve. It's unfathomable how bad they are. Plus, they've been banged up. Out of their 9 games, Tyler, they've had 8 different starting lineups. That doesn't help the cause because they've just had a lot of injuries. Florida State, Notre Dame have something in common there because Notre Dame's O-line's been pretty banged up, but Notre Dame recruits O-line in a stratosphere Florida State doesn't sniff. So that's the difference there. But my concern, as I've said all week on Locked On Seminoles, is just showing different fronts. And if you don't know what you're doing, and again, redshirt freshman, true freshman, it's going to be one of those two guys at quarterback. You don't make the proper check, somebody's getting decked. Drake Bowen is about as kind as a missile. Same thing with Kingston Viliamu-Asa. That's just 2 of them. There's 4 or 5 guys that are really, really good at shooting a gap and making a play. And they do a good job of getting to the ball, rallying and all that stuff. But they've started putting Kingston outside as a blitzer and things like that. I just don't think that Florida State can handle it. Like, is there anything that you're concerned about at all for Notre Dame's defense? Anything?
Not defensively. I think the way that Florida State would have any chance in this game is if they basically take a page out of the NIU playbook and score an 80-yard touchdown thanks to what I consider it's like one of the luckiest touchdowns I've ever seen. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not trying to make an excuse for Notre Dame in that loss to NIU because NIU was the better team that day, but the only touchdown they scored is literally the luckiest touchdown I've ever seen inside Notre Dame Stadium. The quarterback threw it to a different guy, and then some receiver on NIU just happened to run, catch the ball in between 2 Notre Dame defenders who were right there to knock it down. And then there's no one behind him, so he takes off 80 yards for a score. Florida State is going to have to convert on 1, maybe 2 of those plays in this game to score some points because Al Golden, his philosophy is bend but don't break. And I feel like that's a bit of a cliche in college football, but he has shown a willingness to give up 4 or 5 yards on the ground for a few plays. And he'll allow some teams to move the ball a little bit on offense. But then once they get into the red area, I mean, that defense puts the clamps down. Navy had scored on every single one of their red zone possessions this season prior to the Notre Dame game, and then they scored on 1 of 3 in that game. It's a risky strategy sometimes, as is playing man defense, but when you have the caliber of players that Notre Dame has on this defense, it's one you can work with.
Notre Dame's given up less than 50% for touchdown percentage once an opponent reaches the red zone. It's number 10 in the nation in that category, so your point is very much on. One other quick question for you. Do you think Notre Dame's going to blitz even more because of the young quarterbacks for Florida State? Oftentimes, guys heat up young quarterbacks. It's not a really difficult thing to read, but I'm just curious as to your take.
Maybe not early on, because I think Al Golden wants to see what he has in this front four. They have lost 2 of their best edge rushers so far this season, Jordan Botelho and then Boubacar Traore, which has forced Al Golden to get even more creative with his blitz packages because he's brought pressure. Like you said, he's putting Kingston Viliamu-Asa on the outside sometimes. I think that when you play a team like Florida State and the struggles that they've had in the offensive line, this might be a good game to just see how much penetration those front 4 guys can get And if they can't do it, then yeah, he's going to blitz a lot more. But I don't think he's going to feel the necessity to do it early on because there are some guys out there who haven't had a ton of experience, like Junior Tuihalamaka. Maybe this is a get-right game for the defensive line that didn't really need to get right in the first place. You just need to help build some confidence there if you can.
Yeah, that's a great answer. When we come back, we're going to talk more Noles and Irish right here on Locked On. All right. When you're hiring for a small business, do you want to find quality professionals that are right for the role? That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs has the tools to help you find the right professionals for your team faster and for free. LinkedIn isn't just a job board. LinkedIn helps you hire professionals you can't find anywhere else, even those who aren't actively searching for a new job, but might be open to the perfect role. In a given month, over 70% of LinkedIn users don't visit other leading job sites. So if you're not looking on LinkedIn, you're not in the right place. Post your job for free at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. That's linkedin.com/lockedoncollege to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. This show is also brought to you by Robinhood. With Robinhood Gold, you don't need a silver spoon to eat up the financial favors of the 1%. Robinhood Gold allows others to get the rates and perks usually reserved for the high society. Now the resourceful individual with Robinhood Gold can earn the very liberal rate of 4.5% APY on uninvested cash and be rewarded with a handsome 3% retirement boost on an IRA. Robinhood Gold provides the privileges of a high net worth for any net worth. These generous benefits are now available for only $5 a month. The new gold standard is here with Robinhood Gold. Sign up at Robinhood.com/gold. Terms apply for product-specific disclosures. Visit Robinhood.com/gold. Investment involves risk. Rate may change. Gold membership is offered by Robinhood Gold, LLC. All right, let's flip this around a little bit. I don't know exactly how much Notre Dame fans know about Florida State. As I gave a little bit of basic, there's not much to be concerned with their offense. I think the defense has some things to offer, but there are some caveats. So, Tyler, any questions you have for me, buddy? Fire away.
So, look, we all know that Florida State is in the middle of one of the most disappointing seasons of all time. But I want you to take us through the timeline from your perspective. Let's go back to the preseason and talk about, what were your expectations for this team before the year? And then when did you realize, okay, this team is probably not going to be as good as I thought they'd be, to the point where we're at now, where it's shocking, as we talked about earlier?
In the spring, when they were kind of getting ready for the second portal window, I said, this team's 7-5 to 9-3 right now, but they got the portal coming up. We have no idea. They've got to hit some more things. We'll see. And they hit based on the names, based on their recruiting ranking. They're getting kids from Bama, from Georgia, SEC kids and all this, but very few have hit, and they've had some key injuries. The stud running back that guy from Bama got hurt early in the year. Anything that can go wrong like that did. One of the DBs they got from Bama didn't even really start playing until this past week or whatever. I mean, they just haven't had guys acclimate. And it's ironic because Florida State had been the transfer portal kings. This year, they're the transfer portal dumpster fire. Like they lived on it and they hit for years, but it just went polar opposite. What comes around goes around. So their infamous lack of recruiting 2, 3, 4 years ago from the prep ranks came back to bite them. But I picked them right before the season to go 11-1 because I just thought they find a way to win close games. They're 9-3, 10-2 in terms of talent. But the ACC is not great. But once we got to the second game, I was concerned after the Georgia Tech game because the D-line was getting pushed around. Technique was terrible. I didn't see guys running to the ball. In the middle of the second game, I was writing down notes. I said, this team isn't going to a bowl game. There's no way. They don't tackle well. Run gap fits stink. The offensive line's an embarrassment. DJ can't make a read. Why would I think they're going to a bowl game? And I went on Locked On ACC, and I said, they're not going to a bowl. Oh, you guys are crazy. I said, okay. I was the first one in America to say, there's no way they're going to go to a bowl. Now, I didn't think they were going to be in this situation. I thought they were going to win 4 or 5 games maybe, but, 3 wins wasn't out of the question if they had a lot of injury problems. They've had some injuries, but it's just they're terrible. Coaching's bad. The players don't seem to have any ability to have chemistry. And honestly, I even put up a post about this on the X handle for Locked On Seminoles. I think players are starting to quit. And FSU fans believe that. I think the Notre Dame game could be the final nail in the coffin for that. And I think it's going to be a tough press conference for Mike because somebody's going to ask him. Now, he's going to lie through his teeth no matter what because you're not going to say your players are quitting. But somebody's going to ask him that. I think it's to that point, and the Notre Dame Fighting Irish could be the one to kind of kick down that door.
How has Mike Norvell handled the drop-off? I mean, there's obviously no right answer. There's no way he could have seen this coming. But what has been his message to the media and kind of your sense of what he's been saying to the locker room throughout all of this?
We don't know exactly what's going on in the locker room, but his press conferences are just play, record, and repeat next week. It's awful. I make fun of them at this point. I don't like press conferences during the week anyway because coaches hate dealing with guys like us. But he says, well, what we're seeing in practice isn't showing up on the field. Well, that's an indictment of your staff and you. So, whether it's DJ, whether it's the O-line, whatever, we're not meeting the Florida State standard. He just gives every cliche that you could imagine that a Wall Street broker would when he doesn't get your return on investment. Okay, it's the same stuff, but I've tried to look at it literally. This might be the worst good to bad story in the history of college football. It certainly is in consideration, and especially when you consider Florida State is a legendary program. Since Bowden got there, I think it was 76 or whatever is his first season. They've been one of the top 10 programs in the nation vast majority of the time. They're not even one of the top 10 teams in the ACC. They're not even one of the top 14 teams in the ACC. So he finally kind of cracked this week after the game that they had. And like he was talking fast and he was kind of angry and talking about, I know how to do this. I know how we can turn it around. It happens in life, happens in football. Nobody was buying it. They were just using the quotes for their articles. But it was the first time I could tell he cracked. Like he was angry because people were starting to take jabs. And that was still a small one. They were not big haymakers. If they get crushed this week, his press conference after Notre Dame could be epic.
It's so surprising to me too, because when you follow the Mike Norvell career arc, like Florida State was willing to stick with him during those first few seasons when it wasn't really going that well. And then it felt like they were rewarded with 2 really good seasons back to back. He's even mentioned as a potential replacement for Nick Saban at Alabama, which led to a big ol' extension and a big ol' raise. And now it feels like Florida State is a position where they're stuck with him as the head coach because of all the financial ramifications. But I know there's been some rumors going around that they're going to have to basically clean house outside of Mike Norvell with the assistants and all of that. But what do you think is the direction of this program going forward? Because there's obviously nothing that can go better for them this season. But let's say once this season is over, what is going to be their first couple steps, the first few things that they need to do to get things back to where they should be for a program like Florida State?
What they need and what I expect will be polar opposites. They need to keep guys from leaving the program, but I expect an exodus.
Yeah.
Based on how I saw the effort against North Carolina, Tyler, there were plays in the second half, and Carolina's got a great running back, but they had 8 men on the line, and they were bump and run coverage close to the line of scrimmage as well, with where the receivers wound up 1 guy deep. So they essentially had 10 guys up at the line, and UNC was running dives and getting 5, 8, 10 yards. Your players have not given full effort at that point. I'm being very kind. That tells me that the portal will not be kind to Florida State, and they already need all of them to stay and then hit the home run. Like, who are you going to get to come? And on top of that, they have to fire multiple guys. And this is where it gets really touchy. Norvell's not the only one like this. You're in a situation where you need to fire multiple guys, and he's going to be told to. He's an extremely, even by coaching standards, loyal guy. That is not going to work. I know this is kind of a Game of Thrones talking point, but like heads on spikes, like 5, 6 of them. He's not going to want to do that. And I've been talking about he needs to be fired, and there's all the money concern, but somebody might have to pony up because I don't see him doing what the administration wants him to do. And that's a yes or no. You can't half fire somebody. The OC/O-line coach and the linebacker coach are top of the board, but there are other guys too. And, I'm not going to get all into it, but this could go completely sideways. And I don't know what to expect. It could be just wild.
It's similar to Notre Dame after 2016 when they finished 4-8 that year, and they basically made the decision they were going to stick with Brian Kelly, but Kelly was going to have to make some sweeping changes to his staff, and he did, and it led to a really good 4 to 5 year run. But Kelly was an extremely loyal guy. He had to let some guys go, and it ended up working out for them long term. We'll see what happens with Mike Norvell and Florida State, but I do want to get back to this game and specifically the Florida State defense, because we have talked a lot about the Florida State offense and how inept they are on that side of the ball, but they do have some players on that defense. So who are some guys that Notre Dame and Mike Denbrock are going to have to keep an eye out for on that Florida State defense?
Shaheem Brown, the safety, he had the most tackles in the last game, 9. He's a very good player when he wants to be, but he has moments where he doesn't take good angles and stuff. Very physically gifted. He's a guy that will probably end up at the NFL Combine. Nicholson, young linebacker. Graham, young linebacker. Those are a couple guys that can make plays. Both their corners, Thomas and Fintrell Cypress, both certainly capable in and up at the Combine. Thomas in particular, he's a kind of like Cam Hart, 6'2", 200-pound guy, and he could float. They stay away from him more often than not, try to run the ball on Florida State, but their corners are probably their best combo on D. Interior, Jackson had his best game last week. He's 320 pounds. When he wants to go, it's hard to stop him. He's just not a consistent guy, in my opinion, with effort. Joshua Farmer has some moments. He had a play last week. He about decapitated a guy, like another player, 300-pounder, that when he wants to go, it's really hard to stop him. But they got ran on right up the middle, too. Play to play with Florida State, you don't know what you're going to get. I mean, I study them every day of the week. I have no idea what's going to happen on any given play.
Well, with that in mind, how do you think they're going to try to defend Notre Dame's offense, which was pretty rough at the start of the year, but ever since that bye week, it seems like Riley Leonard has figured things out, passing the ball. He hasn't had to run as much, and then when they do want to run the ball, they just give the ball to Jeremiah Love, who's proven to be one of the best backs in the country.
Well, if I was to be a betting man on the style of play, the Florida State and Notre Dame will mirror each other. And what they try to do, and I just think Notre Dame will do a lot better job of it. They've got the corners to line up against Notre Dame. Notre Dame's receivers, they're inconsistent, and I don't trust Riley Leonard game to game either. You don't know hot or cold with him. But they have talent, and there's no denying that Notre Dame is loaded at running back, and their O-line is at least above average despite all their injuries. So I think you'll see 7 in the box, and they'll move Shaheem Brown and Knowles, the other safety. Like, they'll do different things with those guys, moving them up and back, but they're going against a senior quarterback. I don't think it'll have the same dramatic effect that it does against Florida State's redshirt freshman and true freshman quarterback for obvious reasons there. And they'll play man defense. I would be concerned, and there's not much you can do about that, players getting outside, especially Leonard. If you come after him and you miss, we both know that he can take off. You're playing man, you got your back to the line. Riley might have a 70-yard scramble for a score. He's capable. Florida State's got a lot of speed on defense, but they're not disciplined. They're terrible at containing on the edge, have been for multiple years. You can't do that against Riley Leonard. That's a pass on any effort. Like, oh, they're got man. He's probably thinking about it before the snap, is my guess. I would be watching the film because they've been so bad at it. And I also think that Florida State will probably take a few more chances because, again, what has Notre Dame done well? Jeremiah Love, Jadarian Price, those guys at running back, they have NFL potential. They'll probably get paid. I'm going to try to make somebody else beat me besides the guy standing in the backfield. And that's Florida State's style anyway. So I don't think they'll really deviate much from that.
All right, now that we've broken it down on both sides, I think it's time for some predictions. That's coming up next.
Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place your bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's FanDuel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Tyler, I'll let you lead off with your prediction or any final thoughts before you do. It's up to you, but take it away.
I'll just get right into my prediction. I think Notre Dame is going to win this one 45-3. And something that you and I had talked about before we started recording here was that Notre Dame is in a position now where they're competing with some other one-loss teams and they're fighting for playoff seeding. at this point, I feel like if Notre Dame wins out, they finish 11-1, they are a lock to make the college football playoff. But their style points here at the end of the season could be the difference between them hosting a game or having to go on the road and face someone like maybe Ole Miss or have to go to Happy Valley and Penn State. So they're going to try to win, and they're going to try to win big. There are also a ton of recruits on campus this weekend for Notre Dame. So even if Florida State, the win itself isn't going to be a huge boost to their resume or anything like that, you can make for a lot better weekend for those in attendance in South Bend if you go up big early, you keep your foot on the gas, and you win 45-3. I don't know if Notre Dame's offense is ready to put up 50-60, although granted they did score 66 points on Purdue this season, although that Boilermaker team looked like a JV high school team. I think you and I probably could have scored a touchdown in that game, so I don't know what to make of that. I do think for as bad as Florida State has been, they are better than Purdue. So I think 45-3, I just don't really see a way where this Seminole offense is able to get into the end zone against this Irish defense. But I do think that there's enough good players in that Florida State defense to keep the Irish offense from scoring at will.
I'd forgotten to ask you about the style points thing. So thank you for bringing that up. And I agree. My gut feeling is that Notre Dame will run their basic offense. Marcus is a pretty conservative guy for offensive play because he's a defensive player by trade, play linebacker at Ohio State and all that. But I also think with Riley Leonard, they all know the points matter because some people aren't going to watch this game. There are better games to watch Saturday night than Florida State versus Notre Dame. We weren't
going on in Baton Rouge. Yeah.
You know, I would watch the Alabama LSU game, but I mean, I'm going to be watching this. So anyway, I think that they'll get up early. My two questions: what is the quit watch number? Meaning, is it quarter 2, quarter 3? I think Florida State's going to have a lot of players basically quit. Now, they'll still be on the field to a certain degree. Bad angles, the whole 9. And that's why I have it 56-7. I think that Notre Dame will probably get a gift touchdown at some point. Quarterback hit, ball comes up in the air, Howard Cross gets a big man touchdown, something like that. And I think that they will run the ball for 240, 250 pretty easily. They might run for 300 because I think Riley, he's going to bust at least one. There was a design pass and they just don't stay in their rush lanes, something like that.
I think it'll probably be the third quarter. I think Notre Dame will go up big. They'll have a comfortable lead going into halftime. Their starters will come back out for the third quarter if they're able to put a few more points up on the board and that game is so out of hand. Freeman has shown a desire to bring in Steve Angeli, the backup quarterback, and give him real reps. I mean, he played the entire second half of that Purdue game. He played the entire fourth quarter against Stanford. Like, when the game is in hand, Freeman does not waste any time getting his starters out. So if they bring the backups in, and the backups are able to run the ball at will. Notre Dame has some good running backs like Keidron Young and Aeneas Williams, who are freshmen, who are going to be difficult to bring down. I think it gets to the point where if those guys are breaking off 6 to 8 yard runs consistently, I think that could break the will of the Seminoles, and eventually those players decide to quit, even if the starters are still out there, because it's one thing to get beaten up by the opposing team's best players. When you got the backups in and they're starting to feel themselves a little bit, I just think that brings on a whole new level of disappointment.
Well, I agree with that. And you're not going to tell somebody like Keidron or somebody like that, oh, there's 3 minutes left, don't run hard. He's going to truck the first thing that comes in front of him in red. You know what I mean? Or at least try. So, yeah, Notre Dame's going to run the ball in the fourth quarter, but that's what they do anyway. They might break a 50-yard run, especially somebody like Price, who's one of the fastest guys in college football. So I don't think the score will necessarily be indicative, but it wouldn't shock me if Notre Dame scored like 2 touchdowns in the final 7 minutes because Florida State's basically given up and Notre Dame's backups are trying to get more playing time. That's how these scores get completely out of hand. So, Tyler, thank you very much. And thank you to everybody out there. Please like and subscribe to this podcast. Same thing with Tyler, Locked On Irish. I appreciate it. Everybody have a good one, and we will talk to you again soon.